Welcome to the Temple of Limitless Light. We're on Facebook if you want to join us and have access to all the handouts and things I'm going to be talking about in this brief video. We are going to talk tonight about the creation of sigils. And along with that, the creation of talismans and amulets, because the two subjects are very difficult to separate. There's been some questions on where am I getting the sigils that I'm using in the rituals and the classes. And I thought it'd be a good idea to start with basically an overview of some of the more classic, the traditional methods, and then the method that I'm using in particular for the Enochian angels. So one of the books that I really like to go to, I'm going to share my screen. Let me just share here. Then go to here it is. This is sorry. Okay, How to Make and Use Talismans by Israel Regarding. This is a book that you can find very cheaply from Amazon. It's very old. I'm not sure of where it is in terms of its copyright issues, but this is a classic by Israel Regarding, so you know it's got a good pedigree. It's a very short book, and it's very to the point without a lot of blah, blah, blah. That tends to weigh you down when you read these sorts of books. So here's Israel Regarding, and he's going to go over, I want to talk about three methods. The first method is the most classic, the use of the Kameas. They're merely for planetary talismans. And then we'll talk about the rose wheel, and then we'll talk about my method, which is unique to me. So to create a talisman or a sigil, you need a methodology. And
we're not seeing what you're seeing.
oh, okay. So, sorry. Is that shit working? Okay. So this is the book, How to Make and Use Talismans by Israel Regarding. He's going to talk a lot in here about sigil making. Well, what a sigil is, it's a hieroglyph. Hieroglyph like in Egypt. See, when the Hermeticists were getting started, the Greeks went down to Egypt, and they were very impressed by the hieroglyphs, the magical symbols that were used by the Egyptian priesthood. Now, the Egyptians had an everyday writing system, hieratic, that they would use to write for documents and such, but they had hieroglyphics for magical writing and also for symbols. Like Carl Jung talks about how there's a difference between a sign and a symbol. A sign points to something mundane, but a symbol points to something eternal. And so the tradition of creating these magical symbols, these that we're pointing towards these eternal, these archetypal powers, these magical symbols became a tradition. Now, the ability to read hieroglyphics were lost and regained over time, but the idea of creating a single symbol that represents your idea, your magical idea, remained as a part of the tradition even to this day. And one of the oldest methods that we have is given to us by Agrippa, where you would take a numbered square like this, where the numbers add up to the same in both directions. And these are very classic magical squares that are used primarily for planets. And what you would do is you would take this symbol and you would take a name and you'd convert the numbers to Hebrew letters by the Kabbalah of the Nine Chambers. And this is all explained in this book. For instance, like if you have the number 10, you can convert it to an aleph. Because each of the Hebrew letters also has a number associated with it. And so you can convert these numbers to letters, and then you simplify your name. In this case, here's a sigil for the Mars square, the intelligence Barzabel. The Hebrew name is spelled Beth, Resh, Zadi, Beth, Aleph, and Lamed. And so what you would do is you would take out the second Beth, and then you would simply draw it on the square for Mars and the hour of Mars. And the way you would draw the symbol is you draw a circle over the first number, and then you draw using a ruler, you connect the lines till you got the symbol. And then you would draw a little cross over the end of it. And you would do this on, like for Mars, you would want to do it on a Tuesday and in the hour of Mars. And if there was a good astrological, situation with Mars, like you preferably would not want to do it when it was in a retrograde mode. And you could do something like an greater invoking ritual of the hexagram for Mars. You create all this Mars energy and the Mars time, and then you would take a clean sheet of paper and you would draw this symbol, and then you'd have a Mars talisman. And that was how you create a sigil. Now you could also create sigils on these talismans for other things. You would take the Hebrew name for wealth or friendship or love. Like you could take the talisman for Venus, for instance. This one for Jupiter, Saturn. You get down the bottom. And he goes into this, all the symbolism here. You could say, draw the one for the Hebrew word for love over the Venus talisman, and that would create a talisman for Venus to attract love, for example. Here, there's examples of some other sigils that he's creating. So this is a very classic, very basic way of doing it. Now, another way to do it, sorry, I didn't want to spend a lot of time on that, but that primarily you're taking advantage of planetary energies. And so when you're using all these new materials and you're doing it in this energy, like, the time and the ritual to create that energy of the planet, and you're putting that into it, you're imprinting that image into the ink and into the paper. It sort of absorbs it. The idea is that when you're, like, for instance, when you're born, your body is very soft and malleable. And so you absorb the planetary influences of that moment of your birth, according to very classic ways of thinking. And so when you create a planetary talisman, you want to use pure ink, pure paper that's never been used for anything else. That sounds crazy, but in the old days, they would reuse paper because it was very difficult to acquire. Now, the next very classical way of creating a talisman is using the rose wheel, which is just the symbol that I have on my wall. I have the rose cross. And this is the wheel that relates the Hebrew alphabet and a visual pattern. You can see in the middle, we have the cross, and then we have Aleph, Mem, and Shin, which are the three mother letters for air, water, and fire. And then around that, we have the 7 double letters. 7, so they're going to be planetary relation. These also have a relation to the major arcana of the tarot, etc. And then outside of that, we have the 12 simple letters. 12, so there's a relationship to the zodiac. So given this wheel, you can draw Hebrew names in another way. This is the way a lot of people really prefer. So here I have printed out a rose wheel. I'm going to stop sharing so I can just, and that is available as a handout. So here's a rose wheel that I printed out. Now, say I want to make it for Raphael, the Archangel Raphael. Well, I look up the name as it's spelled out. And Raphael's name spelled in Hebrew is Resh, Pe, Aleph, and Lamed. So you would take some paper. This is vellum. I have lots of different types of vellum. This is like a tracing paper. You can use whatever you like, whatever you have on hand. I like to use vellum. I bought this at Staples on sale. They had a ton of vellum on sale. And they have this whole art section at Staples art supply store. So you can get a bunch of this really cheap and then use it, have it for years for your magical supplies. So I would put my vellum on top of my wheel and write out Raphael's name. So Resh, a Pe, Aleph, and a Lamed. Now, when I do this myself, I like to use dip pens and blah, 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 and be really fancy. I have very special inks and all that. You can take it to whatever extreme you want. So first thing I do is I locate Resh. I can see it's right here. This little hat-shaped one. So there I would draw a circle. That marks the beginning of the sigil. And then I look for Pe, which is up a little bit. And I would draw a line to the Pe. I like to use a ruler, so it looks all nice and straight. So, and then Aleph. Which is kind of towards the middle, one of the mother letters. And then down to Lamed, which is at the very bottom on the outer wheel. I put a little line across it. There you go. That would be a sigil for the Archangel Raphael. Very simply drawn on the rose wheel. If you wanted to create an additional symbol, you could say, look up the words in Hebrew or something else, like Raphael is good for healing. You could look up healing. You could also write your name out and trace that over the symbol for Raphael. So it would be you connected to Raphael for healing, just on this wheel using this methods. So you could have multiple of these shapes on here. And then when you had the final figure, like you could draw it like this for practice and for your records, you could then go into the symbol and artistically enhance it. And also you could do a ritual where you invoked Raphael to ask for healing, and then in your mind visually ask for the approval of the sigil. And Raphael may send you a symbol back saying, this is how you can make it better. You can improve your sigil in this method. And so that's the rose wheel method. That's the second most common, probably more common than the Kameas. Kamea is a little more complicated. It involves mathematics and transformation. This is probably a little bit more approachable. Very easy to use the rose wheel. And that's in the class handout. You can print that out. So that's another method. In Hebrew, there are 22 letters. It fits very well into this pattern. Now, those are the classics that I learned when I was practicing magic, when I was first starting to practice magic. Very quickly, my interest shifted towards the Enochian. I was very interested in the Enochian angels, and I wanted a methodology to create a sigil to represent those energies. Because it seemed extremely obvious and very powerful and very necessary as a way to symbolize those energies, because each of the Enochian angels, at least for the elemental and planetary sections, and it's pretty much all elemental and planetary, um, represent very distinct energy forms that needed a way to symbolize the connection. Not so much as like I wanted to say command the angels, like you would if you had the sigil for a goetic spirit. With the goetic spirits, you take their symbol and then you use it as a way to command them. Say, look, you're going to do as I say. You're going to straighten out, do good things, and not cause chaos in my life. The Enochian angels, I wanted a methodology to create an antenna, a more authentic connection to them. Well, there's one problem with that. The names of the Enochian angels come from these tables, and they're drawn in crosses. Like this is the watery part of air, and it's written across and down. And the airy part of air, it's also crossing down. Earthy part of air, crossing down, crossing down. So you get crosses. Not very interesting. And it's not distinct. They're all the same. The elemental king, Baltal Eva, is a spiral. And the kings on each, there's 4 of these in my temple here. The kings are all spirals. So there's not really any way to distinguish them. Then other angels, the seniors, are just straight lines. So kind of not really interesting sigils there. I mean, there are some of the angels that do have their own sigils that are in Dee's work, but that's in the vast minority. Now, trying to map Enochian onto this wheel is a little difficult because in Enochian there are 21 letters, and in Hebrew there are 22. And so the symbols, the two systems don't perfectly match up. There's some places where they mesh really well, and then other places where they don't connect at all. You don't want to force them because then you end up with something very contrived. But it's hard to have confidence in. So I did what every good magician does. I did ritual. I invoked Raphael. It was one of the angels that originally transmitted the information to Dee and Kelly, and I asked for a system which I could create my own sigils to represent the Enochian angels so that I could better connect with those energies to sort of balance out my personality, my karma, connection to the universe. I remember that ritual. It was very successful. Raphael showed, was all of that, was very powerful and amazing. And I stayed in the temple and slept. The next day, I sat down at my work desk and just a complete system kind of just came out onto the paper. And I call that the Enochian trigon. So instead of having a wheel, what came out is a triangle. This triangle shape was very easy to draw using a compass and a ruler, for dividing the space into smaller and smaller triangles. And really, it's 3 diamonds that kind of fit together. The Enochian letters are divided, when Dee and Kelly received them, they were divided into 3 groups of 7. And the number 7 is very, very important to the whole entire system of an Enochian magic. It's the core. By 7 are they ruled, by 7 they're commanded. There's a whole speech about 7. 7 is really core to the system. So 3 groups of 7 divided into a triangular shape. I also didn't want to, as part of this information I received, I didn't want to remove letters. Very important to me to represent all the letters in a name and not just remove them to make it easier or whatever. And this is in the handout. And I also have an English version. I want to use that. So in the Enochian names, there are a lot of repeats. And it's very hard to draw a symbol. Like if you have OIO, then you just have a straight line, right? So what I received was if you have OIO, draw a straight line and then a curve back. And where you have repeated letters, draw a spiral. So the sigils that I ended up with have both curved and straight lines, which makes them a lot more interesting to look at and become very descriptive of the angelic forces that they're representing, that they're the sort of antennas of. Um, oh, sorry. That was from earlier. Okay, so let me show you one in particular. This is one I think is particularly nice. This is air of water. And you see the problem here with drawing it is that we've got OBGOTA, AABRO. Okay. So how would we draw something like this? How would I end up with something along these lines? Then we take out some tracing paper, or if you want, you can print out the trigon itself and just draw it straight on here. If you don't have tracing paper, can't always have all these art supplies around. That's understandable. Okay, yes. Back to my journal. The name is spelled in English OBGOTA AABKO. So what we would do is, and I'm going to just use the English version here. So this has two names. So the first one starts at the top, the circle. So I draw a circle over the letter O. Then where's my ruler just a minute? Oh, here it is. Draw a line down to B. Then to G. But here's the problem. So G is right next to the B on this. The line crosses over it. So to represent the G, I would draw a little curve. See? Or the B to the G. And then I need to go back to O. O is where I started. So we draw another curved line. Okay, so having done that, I need to draw to the T. Then to A. Giving me a symbol like this. So this is the first, the first name. But these angels, you get two names, right? But according to the tradition, the first name summons and the second one controls. Maybe masculine, feminine, yin, yang, maybe a username and a password to access that energy. But you get two names, and they're cross shape. They have 10 letters total, 11 if you count the middle letter twice. And they're also called Sephirotic angels for that. So that's the first name. So I'm going to draw the second name on top of it. Now, a lot of times when I would draw these for the first time, I would use 2 colored pencils. But I'm not going to worry about that. Okay, so draw the second name. The last name ended on the A, and the second one name has 3 A's to begin with. So first I'll draw a circle around the cross, right? Now I'll draw a cool spiral representing multiple A's. And then it goes to the B, connecting up there. And then I need to go to the K. K is right in the middle here. So I draw another cool loop. And then it ends where we started on the O. So that's how I'm drawing and getting these symbols. Well, that's not as neat and nice as my exemplar. But as you can see, they do match up. This one is the one that's like for my records, whereas this one I just drew in a few minutes, just as a demonstration. And they do match up. It's just but that's the methodology that I'm using to create sigils for the Enochian angels. And typically what I would do is I would create a base one for my records. Then I would draw a pretty one that I was going to use. And I would do an invoking ritual. I would invoke the spirit, in this case, Abgata Eabko, who is the area part of water, representing the very essence of this time, too. It's springtime 2024. A lot of energy, awakening from the wintertime, effervescence, excitement, emotional knowledge and understanding, deep emotional awareness. And I would do the ritual. I would invoke the angel and get approval, ask it to approve the symbol. And sometimes it would give me a little modifications. Most of the time it'd be fine with it. And then once I felt like I was in touch with that angel, I would charge the symbol, usually by drawing an invoking spiral over it, sealing the energy in. Then that would become the talisman for that angel.
Aaron, do your Enochian angels, like, are those talismans, like, that's the talisman for that angel, or does it adjust itself over time for any reason?
You draw the talismans for the specific angels. And these are the exemplars in my grimoire. That represents a connection to a very specific slice of reality, very specific slice of elemental energy that's manifesting in our reality. Like this one is fire. And it came out with kind of a furnace-like shape. They're also, oh yeah, so we can also do them for the seniors and create, this one is Ea Tepo, is Mars of fire. Very powerful when indeed. And this is in the book, this is the one that I actually used to draw everything from. So as part of my grimoire. I have a lot more in here. Oh, yeah. Here we go. Here's the one we were just talking about, but I just redrew. pull these out, see them better. That one's the airy part of fire. Has some reflections in it. Airy part of fire is fire of the mind, very charismatic type of energy, charisma, leadership, very powerful in those sorts of ways. Water of water, very emotional feeling. I was very surprised this one didn't come out with hardly any circular energy, very angular. Perhaps like a modern art, like a very interesting to me. Another one, air of air, didn't come out with. Kind of expected this one to be a lot more angular, a lot of straight lines. Earth of air, the manifestation of ideas, that involve a lot of curved lines and spinning around. And earth of earth, representing perhaps some sort of need for balance and emotion. But these are the methodologies that I'm using. So you have a lot of options for creating sigils. If your focus is you want to do something that's on a more traditional level, you can go with the Kameas. They're available. That book, How to Make and Use Talismans, is a treasure trove of very clear instruction on how to create talismans, written by Israel Regarde. You can get it off Amazon for a few dollars, or you can probably find it on the internet for free. It's probably, I don't know what the copyright status of it is. It's probably out of copyright. And those Kameas are a classic planetary base. And, planetary energies, you can accomplish anything you want. Jupiter, if you want to do money spells, Jupiter talisman, if you need setting boundaries or you need education, Saturn, artistic creation, you can go with Venus, or love, education, all kinds of things. Whatever you want, you can get through planetary magic. And so that's a very classic approach, and it's very doable. Another way is using the rose wheel. That's also very classic. And I have the rose wheel here in my temple. If I can adjust the camera, I'll show it to you. You can see it. Whoops. It's wanting to bounce back. Whoa. Okay, so you can see I've got it on the wall of the temple back here. And so I can invoke, say, Raphael, and spell out its name on the rose wheel on my wall as a way of using my wand, right? That's a very classic, the rose wheel. That's a very popular approach to creating talismans. I would use a Hebrew dictionary and look up the name of whatever it is I wanted to manifest and spell it out that way, and also write my name over it. And then finally, you have my receive method for creating the names, which are really more specific to the Enochian system and the Enochian angel names, but it could be adapted in other ways too, because it will accept multiple letters within the same name. And all these documents are in our Facebook group, which will be in the comments below. Thank you very much. That's what I have prepared for this recording. See you in the temple.